Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Dennis Taylor, a board member of Big Sky 55 Plus. I retired after 46 years of public service, including as a city manager in Helena, Billings, Whitefish, Bozeman, and Eugene, Oregon. My wife and I live in Helena, where we enjoy the company of our 2 adult daughters and many friends. So Big Sky 55 Plus was founded to give Montana's older people a stronger voice in the deliberations about our state's future. We bring people together to work for solutions that make life better for Montanans of all ages. We have a remarkable success, passing good bills, killing bad bills, holding lawmakers accountable, and electing those who work for the common good. We also sponsor inspiring and fun events like last summer's Whistle Stop Tour for Social Security and last spring's Gathering Wisdom Building Power Conference in Billings. So you're invited to join. Please sign up to join Big Sky 55 Plus on the link in the chat. So the night's theme is Steps to Make Montana Taxes More Fair. Our dynamic and distinguished speakers are Mike Jopek, Whitefish farmer and past vice chair of the House Taxation Committee, Representative Mark Thane from Missoula, vice chair of the House Taxation Committee and sponsor of House Bill 155, one of the vehicles to address rising residential property taxes, and Rose Bender, the Montana Budget and Policy Center's research team, she is with the Montana Budget and Policy Center research team to study and advance economic policies that equitably invest in communities. So I'm really excited to hear from them, but before we begin with the topic at hand, I'd like to ask our lobbyist, Margie MacDonald, to give us a quick highlight of what's on the front burner of some of the other priority issues. Margie.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm just really excited to hear from this panel, so I'll try and be quick. We are at day 65 of a 90-day session, which means we're getting close to the end game for the 2025 session. That means that House Bill 2, the state budget, has now passed second reading in the House floor yesterday and will soon be out of the House and over to the Senate. One of the things we were really looking for in that budget and have been working toward is a cost of living adjustment for the providers in skilled nursing and assisted living and home and community-based services for older adults and people with disabilities across the state. This is really critical human service infrastructure that is so important, particularly as we see the baby boom generation start to hit their 80s. And fortunately, I can report to you that they do have that 3% cost of living in the budget. I'm very pleased to see that. We're going to have to watch it closely in the Senate. It will definitely be at risk for being taken out. So we'll keep you posted on that. And thank you for your help on that. I know many of you have spoken to your lawmakers about that. One of the other really big issues for this year was to advance our Montana Medicaid health care for adults that was to sunset at the end of this year. And that, thanks to the work of a really broad coalition of Montanans working and pulling together, including rural and hospitals and urban hospitals and public health centers, and actually, you know, bipartisan Democrats and lots of moderate Republicans. We saw, you know, small businesses and big businesses, and just a real strong coalition effort to get that through. And the governor has now signed it into law. One of the areas that we are a little bit worried about in regard to that is the they will want to, we do have work requirements in our law, but the federal government had not given us a waiver to put those in. They're often a very challenging hoop for people, particularly who are challenged with behavioral health and or substance use disorder, to sort of maintain and jump through a whole bureaucracy every, few months or so to keep their health care. So that may come on, though, eventually. And there's a bill from Representative Bill Mercer that would apply, raise the Montana capped that age at 55. And Representative Mercer wants to take it up to 62. And we are working against that. We have sent out an alert to many of you. It's passed the House, and it's now passed the Senate Public Health Committee, and is on its way to the floor. So we'll be reaching out to you to reach out to your senators about that in the next couple days. Next, I just want to comment about, there still is alive a move to build a revolving loan financing mechanism for affordable housing using our coal tax trust monies. And what that does is $50 million at a lower interest rate leverages millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in private capital to build housing that not only older adults, but nurses and teachers in the workforce, the clerks and the front essential employees that we learned about during COVID can afford to live in, and young families. So we are crossing our fingers and working hard to make sure we have that financial tool to build affordable housing. And then we had a big win the other day on the floor of the House. Probably the worst partisan Supreme Court and District Court election bill died on the floor. That's Senate Bill 42. It would have required everyone from the Justice of the Peace candidate to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to declare a partisan, loyalty, and then and they could call themselves an independent, but it just would have politicized the courts and is not worked well in other states. Just witness what we saw in Wisconsin. And however, there are two more bills in the pipeline that are not quite as broad as the Emmerich bill. One is Senator Wiley Galt's Senate Bill 543 that just got dropped in to the at the last minute. It was heard today in Senate Judiciary. They immediately took action and are sending it to the floor. So they'll be voting on this in the Senate in the next couple days. And then another one we've written to you about, and that's House Bill 838, which is Speaker Brandon Lear's. It's another partisan election bill just for the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court. And that has now passed out of the House Judiciary. We are working the floor and trying to stop it in the House. And I think with that, I better stop so we can get to our awesome panel. And I'm happy to answer questions in the Q&A. I don't know if we mentioned it, but if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A, and if we can, we'll respond online, and we'll also cycle them to the panelists as we go through. And if there's time at the end and you have a question for me after you've talked to the panel, I'm still here and happy to answer. So thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Margie. Great report. Lots of work ahead. So just some ground rules. After each panelist speaks, we will try to have one or two follow-up questions. The town hall is 1 hour long, so time for questions is limited. Please go to the bottom of your screen to the Q&A button to post your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. We're recording this town hall meeting for later playback, so let's get started. Mike Jopek is a whitefish farmer, and he's been growing food on the same land for 35 years. He's a regular columnist for the Flathead Beacon. Mike previously served in the state legislature, where he carried the last 6-year reassessment bills for the Joint Select Committee on Reappraisal, a bipartisan Senate and House approach to equalizing state property tax. So, Mike, tell us about what you've learned.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. I appreciate being invited and I appreciate the hard work that you guys do. I know it's a never-ending battle that you guys are advocating for, and a lot of Montanans really appreciate the effort. Like Dennis said, I am a farmer. I grow things like garlic, specialty crops on agricultural land. So it's a little bit slightly different than Class 4 residential land. I originally started paying attention to property tax reappraisal because my neighbors Gladys and Agnes, who had moved here to the Whitefish area some 50 years ago, they each purchased their land for about $5,000, and then over the years put their kids through school and did all sorts of wonderful things for their community. And suddenly, just through the reappraisal cycles, their homes are worth $1 million. These are existing homes, people who have lived here for an extremely long time, fixed income folks, and suddenly their homes are worth $1 million. And that causes undue burden on especially retired folks. And so I started paying attention to reappraisal, and I kind of figured that the 23 and the upcoming 25 reappraisal would be large given what's been happening with the housing market across the nation. And just for an example, going back to the 23 reappraisal cycle, that's the taxes that folks have been paying on their homes for the last 2 years. You probably have another installment due in the upcoming months. That particular reappraisal revalued existing homes now. We're not talking new construction, we're talking existing homes by increased the taxable value by $800 million. That's the taxable value. That's the portion that's taxed. And that's just an enormous amount. That's 43% increase statewide. Now, because the state levies 101 mills against that $800 million increase, that means the state is generating about $80 million extra just from the 23 reappraisal. That's the state portion. Now, what ends up happening locally is there's a five-fold increase in distribution locally because there's more mills involved, et cetera. But locally, there's an enormous shift locally from industries like centralized industries, pipelines, utilities, railroads, telecoms, and they end up paying less because the home values spiked. So the 23 reappraisal increased taxes about 43% on the state level. We have another reappraisal that's coming into the cycle right now. Your homeowners will be getting their notice here pretty much as soon as the legislatures leave town. The assessments will hit the mailboxes. Those increases are 21%. And so 43% last time, 21% upcoming this time. This upcoming recycle increases taxable values again on homes by about $620 million. Now you put these two reappraisal cycles together, it's a $1.4 billion increase in taxable value. Now, if you don't think that's a large number, when I was in the legislature, the overall taxable value for homes was $1 billion. This is a $1.4 billion increase on existing homes, not new construction again, existing homes, on the folks like Gladys and the folks like Agnes. And what's ended up happening now because of these massive increases in taxable value that the state levies taxes against is the taxable values have pretty much spiked. If you look at the taxable value charts for homes, it's like a 45-degree angle straight like this. Whereas every other class of property, the telecommunications, the utilities, they're flat. They're just absolutely flat. And the reasons that they're flat is because homes are the only class of property in Montana that are actually valued at 100% of market value. The rest of the properties in the classes, the utilities, the pipelines, the transmissions, the telecoms, the railroads, they get sweetheart deals. They get secret deals. There's defects in state law, and there's not legitimate values on those properties. because homes are the only ones going up again. Homes are the ones that are going to see the largest burden that we're seeing. Now, that $1.4 billion in increased taxable value that I speak of as a result of the 23 and the 25 reappraisal cycles for homes is just in 4 years. And it means that the state is going to levy 101 mills against that 1.4 billion, means the state is collecting $140 million per year, every year moving forward, just from these two reappraisal cycles. That's the money that the state has already put into their revenue projections in House Joint 2. The numbers are already in there. That's what the state is anticipating to collect. They're anticipating to collect the baked-in portion from the 23, and they're anticipating to collect the additional reappraisal cycle from the 25. That's what they put into House Joint 2, the state revenue projection. Now, I mentioned that when I got into this into the legislature, homes were worth, taxable value-wise, about $1 billion. In 2020, that number jumped to $2 billion. Now, from 2020 to 2024, it jumped up to $4 billion. It just about doubled in just those 4 years, in those 4 pandemic years on those 2 reappraisal cycles. That's an enormous spike, and it's causing just a vast property tax increase on homeowners across the state of Montana. It's why folks are pig biting mad, frankly. Now, this Department of Revenue did an analysis, and what they found out is that the 23 and the 25 cycle would increase property taxes in Cascade County for a 500,000 home by $962. That's real money. In the Flathead, for $1 million home like Gladys's, $900 per year. These are Department of Revenue numbers. In Glacier County, for a $500,000 home, $1,500 property tax increase on a home. Lewis and Clark, for $1 million home, $1,465. Missoula, for $1 million home, $1,472. Silver Bow in Butte, $1,034 for a $500,000 home. Property tax increase from 2 reappraisal cycles. And in Yellowstone, for $1 million home, $1,805 a property tax increase. Now, that's why people are mad across the state of Montana on what's happening. These aren't local levies that are going on. This is the state that has spiked the taxable value and has caused this massive local shift. And it's also the state that's collecting all this additional revenue, $140 million per year. And at the local level, you're seeing this massive shift, about 5-fold, 500 million, 600 million. Those kind of numbers is what is happening locally as the industries, the utilities, the pipelines, the transmissions are getting the equivalent tax break. We're picking up their tab. Now, when you add in farms and small businesses, you're adding about another $20 million of taxable value. You're getting to about 160 million, meaning that when you have homes and small businesses and farmland under reappraisal, the state is collecting about $160 million per year. Again, homes spiked up, everything else stayed flat. Now, what do you do about this stuff? I mean, my goodness, this has never happened this way in Montana before. Every other legislature, when they were faced with land rush reappraisals, they simply lowered the multiplier. They saw that home values went up 43%. They lowered the multiplier by 43%. So the state collected the exact same amount of money after reappraisal as they did before reappraisal. And when they did that, they also stopped the local shifting of homeowners having to pick up the tab for these centralized utilities. And that's always worked for folks like Gladys and Agnes. They haven't been priced out of the homes. It's only the last 4 years that have really caused this tremendous problem. Now, in the spirit of 76, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Department of Revenue said, that the tax rate multiplier that I spoke of has to be in order for the state to be able to collect the same amount of money after as before. Homeowners are equal statewide. And they said that the tax rate for residential should be reduced down to 0.76. That's the spirit of 76. That's where the target number needs to go on any of these reappraisal bills if you don't want to see homeowners get a massive property tax increase as a result of the 23 and the upcoming 2025 reappraisal cycles. Now, you have to remember again, real money for Gladys, it's $900 a year, every year. That's like real money to her. Now, there's a bill out there, Representative Burns, 528. It's made its way out of appropriations and is heading to the House floor. It got some funky amendments in appropriations that Representative Lou Jones put on the bill after he sent that email to all his out-of-state lobbyist buddies to get active. And so there's some trouble with it, but it's fixable. And what that bill basically does is, in the spirit of 76, it makes the residential tax rate 0.76, and that's what it needs to be for homeowners to stay even. Now, the 0.76 doesn't have to be in 528. It could be in another bill. The governor could have put that into his bill, 231, House Bill 231, which, by the way, the Republicans in the Senate actually tabled. They saw it was a crappy bill. The governor's bill basically wanted you to have to apply and go through all this paperwork, and it's just a tremendous nightmare for elderly folks. He had 23 FTE in his bill, and the biggest portion is he only wanted to give you half your money back. That was his biggest problem. He didn't want to give the rest of the money back. Remember, the state of Montana is going to collect $160 million extra per year. That's the amount that the homeowners should be getting back. So that's the amount that should be in all of these fiscal notes coming forward. Now, 528 also maintains the $1.5 million cap on large homes, means large McMansion homes over $1.5 million get taxed at a slightly larger, higher rate. It maintains that cap. That's also existing law. It has no FTE, no paperwork. It's easy to understand. It's simple. Representative.
I hate to cut in right now, but we have Representative Thane available, and he's got to go back to the floor as they're still taking action in the House of Representatives. We'll circle back to you after we talk with him. So Representative Mark Thane is a Missoula native and a graduate of the University of Montana. Mark completed his 39-year career in Missoula public schools in 2019, retiring as their superintendent. Representative Thane is serving his third session of the Montana legislature, representing House District 89 in Missoula and Lolo. His legislative committee assignments include House Taxation, where he's vice chair, House Education, House Agriculture. Mark also served as vice chair of the Revenue Interim Committee. And so thank you, Mark, for jumping off the floor so you could share with us what you've thought about this session this year.
Thank you for the introduction. And it's certainly my pleasure to be here. Right now, it's been a long day on the floor, so it's nice to have a little bit of a break. Mike did a great job of setting the stage. I think one of the critical things, first of all, is to identify the problem. And as was referenced, when we got our reappraisal notices in 2023, there was a huge spike. And in fact, residential market value and taxable value went up about 48%. And that translated into a 21% increase in property taxes. As Mike stated, we're due for another reappraisal. It'll be about a 21 to 22% increase on a statewide average. One thing that's a little bit different this time around is last reappraisal cycle, a fair amount of the increased value was in our urban areas. You'll see on this reappraisal cycle that more of the rural areas will be impacted. And I think part of that's a function of the fact that many of our urban areas have become unattainable in terms of housing, and that's pushed people out to the periphery. So if you contemplate the Bozeman area, you're seeing people pushed out to Belgrade, Three Forks, Manhattan, etc., where housing prices have now gone up, and they'll experience a lot of that increase. As Mike referenced, there are 16 classes of property, and residential went up significantly. Prior to that reappraisal in 2022, the Department of Revenue in the biennial report reported that residential class 4 property was responsible for about 51.85% of the property tax burden in the state, and basically the other 48% was spread among the other 15 classes of property. So to give you a feel for that, after the 23 appraisal, when residences began assuming more of the burden, we saw that centrally assessed saw about a 17% decrease in their property taxes. Electrical generation and telecom saw about a 20% decrease. You could go right across the board. Railroads, airlines at about a 15% decrease. So the challenge, of course, is how do we get a reset? And as Mike referenced, there are a number of proposals that are still technically alive. We're at a critical juncture in terms of transmittal. So unless bills have moved to the other chamber, they will be effectively dead this weekend. But as he referenced, the governor's task force bill on property tax is House Bill 231, which is being carried by Lou Jones. And the premise originally on House Bill 231 was an attempt to try and solve the property tax situation exclusively within Class 4. So the proposal did not want to shift any of the burden back to other classes of property. Rather, it wanted to place the burden for increased tax on those residences that are not primary residences, so they're not occupied 7 or more months, or those residences that are owned by out-of-state owners. One of the problems that bill encountered was a little bit of pushback because there are a lot of Montanans, many farmers and ranchers that may have a home on the farm or ranch, but have a second home in town that's not their primary residence. And then many Montana families who may be fortunate enough to have a cabin in the woods or a cabin on a lake that's been passed down through generations. And those second homes that are not primary residences are subject to a significant tax penalty, essentially, in House Bill 231. It's been amended several times, and I understand that even though it's tabled in Senate tax presently, there are currently additional amendments being drafted. So I wouldn't say it's dead yet, despite the vote that happened in Senate taxation. I am the carrier for House Bill 155, and House Bill 155 essentially was a Democratic priority bill. We worked on it over the course of the summer, and I introduced it early in the session. I think one thing that's somewhat interesting is it passed the House floor 5 weeks ago, but will finally have its hearing in Senate taxation tomorrow morning. The premise of House Bill 155 really gets to what Mike described previously, and that's a bit of a reset, but it approaches differently than House Bill 528, which reduces the residential effective tax rate to 0.76%. So again, we went back to the Department of Revenue's biennial report from 2022. And if you were to look at it, again, Class 4 residential property was responsible for just under 52% of the property taxes. Overnight, when the reappraisal notices went out, suddenly Class 4 residential was responsible for nearly 59% of the property tax burden. So when we crafted House Bill 155, we basically looked at each of the 16 classes of property and tried to reset them to the approximate share of the property tax burden that they bore prior to the last reappraisal. So House Bill 155 would take the residential share from about 59% back down to 52%. If you look at agriculture, prior to the last reappraisal cycle, ag land was bearing 3.99% of the burden. In House Bill 155, it bears 3.83% of the burden. You could go right on down, everything from telecoms, centrally assessed forest lands. We basically reset their percentage of the burden back to the 2022 levels. We were able, with legislative fiscal division, to develop a dynamic model that would take a look county by county at the impact of that bill. And that's been really helpful as we look at trying to develop a single tax policy that fits 56 very disparate counties across the state of Montana. Mike referenced the 95 mills, and I think there's an important distinction to be made between House Bill 231 and House Bill 155. 231 collects all the 95 mills, and in fact, we would find that there's about $70 million of excess revenue collected by House Bill 231. Right now, under current statute, about 55% of that would be rebated back to property tax owners via the school equalization model. There's a bill that's actually up for hearing tomorrow, I believe, also, that would change that percentage to 95%. So essentially, the overage would largely be rebated in property tax relief. House Bill 155 approaches it differently. If you look at our fiscal note, about $70 million would not be collected in the 95 mills and would instead be left in property taxpayers' pockets. So House Bill 155 would provide about $136 million of property tax relief across the state for Class 4 residential properties. Mike already talked about House Bill 528 somewhat extensively, so I won't spend much time on that, but just know that it's out there and alive too, and it could be one of the solutions. And then Senate Bill 90 is still in the possession of House taxation. We actually took executive action on it this morning and tabled it, just as 231's tabled in the Senate. It would take about $60 million from the accommodations tax. That's money that currently flows to the general fund, not to the tourism bureaus, to provide property tax relief. It's not a significant number in the grand scheme of things, but there have been several bills in the last couple days to try and add additional revenue streams to Senate Bill 90 so that it would provide a greater amount of property tax relief. I think the bottom line in terms of property tax is right now we've got 4 or maybe even more vehicles that are alive. I think there'll have to be a lot of negotiation and some sausage making, but I'm confident we'll come out with some kind of property tax relief. There are some in the majority party who I think would rather see rebates again and a smaller property tax fix like Senate Bill 90. But I think it would be a tragedy if this legislature sine-died without doing something structurally to fix the property tax issue. So we continue to work diligently. There are a lot of conversations going on. There are other bills that will nibble at the edges of property tax and contain some minor reductions. For example, there's a bill that would change the rates for reimbursement on school transportation, which happens in every county. And the net effect is about a $10 million reduction in property taxes across the state. So you take all these other little bills that will chip away at property tax and you put them in conjunction with one of the other bills, and I think we're positioned where we can affect some positive change. I think the degree of significance for each of those bills in terms of the change that they would bring is still to be fully understood. Like I said, we have a couple dynamic models, one built for House Bill 231 and one for House Bill 155 that allow us to model any home price, the median home price in every county, et cetera, and see what the impacts are. And just to give you a sense of how disparate those values are, in Gallatin County right now, the median home price is $646,000. Yet if you go to Roosevelt County, the median home price is $72,690. So to find a single tax policy that works in each of those counties, and as we shift the burden from residential back to the other classes of property in each county. We want to make sure that we're not really negatively impacting businesses or local residences. The other thing that we contemplate, if you were to look at the distribution of home values, if you look in Yellowstone County, the vast majority, over 70% of the homes have a taxable value under $500,000. And in Gallatin County, it's basically the opposite, about 70% are above $500,000. So again, the challenges are significant. There needs to be some collaboration across the aisle to get something to the finish line. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to affect some positive change.
Thank you, Representative Thane. I know you have to get back to the floor, but do you have time for a question?
I do.
Okay, I'm curious, how does this legislative session compare to previous legislative sessions with regard to the issue of tax fairness?
Thanks for the question. I think there are a couple ways I could respond to that question. Again, this is my third session on tax, and I've been on revenue interim a couple sessions. And as Mike referenced, years ago, there used to be a 6-year reappraisal cycle. And when we were on a 6-year cycle, the tax rate was constantly adjusted. They went to a 2-year cycle a number of years ago in order to mitigate the size of the changes that occurred. Unfortunately, we had a bit of an anomaly. Well, I shouldn't say an anomaly because it's continued now for 2 reappraisal cycles, but we've seen this great spike. I think last session, there was some hesitation to deal with property tax. I think there was a lack of comprehensive understanding on the part of a number of members of the legislature. I think we saw also greater division in the House. We had a supermajority on one side of the aisle and only 32 members on the other side. As a Democrat, we now have 42 on our side of the aisle, and it feels very different to me. And I don't mean this necessarily in a partisan way, but I think that has forced a higher degree of collaboration and more of a problem-solving approach because we're closer to a split that's more even in the House. So I'm encouraged by that. And I do think that there are people on both sides of the aisle who are very serious about finding some resolution to property tax this time. So last time our hopes didn't get much traction, but this time I'm optimistic we will get something across the finish line.
That's great news. Thank you for leaving the floor and joining us tonight. We appreciate the work that you do on behalf of Montanans' middle class, low income taxpayers. I know it's hard work, but thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And I would just throw a shout out on a couple other things. We've got some big bills with income tax changes that are working their way through the system. I'm concerned because they're of a large enough size that it could cause us to be out of structural balance 4 years down the road if we're not paying attention. And then we have a bill to exempt a greater amount of Social Security income for those people that are married filing jointly under $65,000 or singles under $40,000. And again, that's about a $50 million price tag, but it's still alive and working through the system. So lots to pay attention to on the tax side.
Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to go to Rose and talk with her and then circle back to Mike to talk a little bit more after Rose answers a few questions for us as well. Rose Bender oversees Montana Budget and Policy Center's research team to study and advance economic policies that equitably invest in our communities. Her research focuses state fiscal policy, advocating for a fair tax code that supports a robust state budget. Previously, she worked at the Montana Department of Revenue as an economist and a tax policy analyst, estimating impacts to state revenues and researching policy issues. Thank you for joining us tonight, Rose. Please tell us what's on your mind.
Thank you for the introduction, Dennis. I am going to share screen and show a couple slides. Mark gave me a perfect, although I think I'm not showing it correctly there. on one second. Mark gave me a perfect introduction because I am going to talk a little bit about the focus on the income tax bills that we have ahead of us. And I wanted to start by talking through how we kind of evaluate our proposals that we see. And I know I'm having a little trouble with PowerPoint. I wanted to show you all not presentation view, but I'm struggling a little bit. There we go. Okay, that's right, yes. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a picture showing our state and local tax system and who pays our taxes in Montana. You can see it split out by income level, with the lowest 20% of Montanans paying an effective state and local tax rate of 9.5% compared to the wealthiest 1% of Montanans paying a state and local tax rate of 6.7%. You can see that kind of split into 3 buckets of taxes. This first one, light blue, is our select sales and excise taxes, so things like lodging tax, beer tax, etc. This second one, which you can see is actually progressive, is our income tax system. You can see this little green bar popping up among the income levels, until we get to this top 20%, and then you can see it kind of even out. That used to not be the case in Montana. In 2003, Montana seriously cut our income tax system, collapsed the brackets and cut the rates, and started making our tax system essentially more regressive than it had been before. And then that income tax structure somewhat held steady with changes, but not major changes until kind of 2021, when we've been seeing the pattern start again with cuts to the top income tax rate. Anyway, you can see the income tax system kind of offsets the regressivity of the other tax types, and property tax is this last bar, the most regressive, which probably doesn't surprise anyone, and is the reason that it was has been such a topic this session, and Mark and Mike have covered that very well. So So that is how we could look at all tax proposals when we're doing our work in the legislative sessions. We're looking for proposals that help reduce the regressivity of our tax system and help families with low and moderate incomes. So there are a lot, as Mark just mentioned, a lot of income tax cut bills moving. And I'm showing some slides here of how we've been framing them. I'm going to skip here to the next one. You can see tax cut bills by the number. What's interesting this session, and Margie kind of maybe touched on this, maybe didn't, but is that even though there are a lot of proposals, very expensive proposals to cut our income tax system, there's not complete agreement in the Republican Party about which proposal to move, which has kind of been an opportunity to get a proposal better than what was originally proposed by the governor, frankly. And you can see in this table right here, Senate Bill 323, which is the first one, and this week was actually tabled in Senate Taxation Committee, and then tried to blast to the floor. That blast actually failed. So this bill is not alive right now. It is the most regressive and the most expensive of the bills, the income tax bills that are moving. And you can see that here. It would, again, the top 1% of Montanans over $11,000 in annual tax cuts, while everybody else receives very little. Those near the median get on average $124 in income tax cuts. And this bill is expected to, if passed, cost about $600 million each biennium moving forward. The Legislative Fiscal Division, when we throughout session, create something called does a status sheet, which essentially is looking at like expenditures and comparing them to revenues and what we can expect with the legislation that's moving. That status sheet right now doesn't have any of the big income tax cut bills in it, and it doesn't assume any sort of recession coming, and we're still not having a structural balance in 2029. So we have a negative structural balance forecast for 2029 without these huge income tax cuts. And there's risks on the horizon. We all know that. So good news that Senate Bill 323 still isn't with us at this moment. The others that are moving are Senate Bill 203 and House Bill 337. which are both a little bit more expensive, but by and large, tax cuts for the wealthy as well. So we'll continue to push against those and work on amendments to make them smaller and make them a little more targeted. We have gotten an earned income tax credit increase into House Bill 337, which is a good thing. Earned income tax credit is a credit for working families with low incomes. And then these are just some graphics we've put together. This is one of the income tax cut bills, and how much it would cost each year as a third grader this year moves towards graduation. You can see just serious amounts of revenue lost, which could be used to invest in other things. And this is the last graphic I'll show for now, but this is comparing that 550 million in tax cuts for the wealthy versus, and this is just a list of some investments that we could be choosing to invest in Montana, but we aren't when we choose tax cuts for the wealthy.
So I know you follow things on the national level, the tax proposals at the federal level. Can you fill us in on some of those?
Yeah, I would be happy to. And I am going to share slides again. I should have just kept them up. Silly me. There we go. Okay. So, and you all are just seeing the slide again, correct? Yes. Okay. So, I imagine you all have been unable to escape the national news. And in that budget resolution that folks are working on right now, there are some harmful funding cuts to essential services. It's been a topic of the news. And at the end of February, the House of Representatives passed a budget resolution calling for 4.5 trillion in tax cuts and a $2 trillion reduction in federal spending over the next decade. So this chart is showing, and that will be flowing through to the states, as we know, through our tax code, through investments at the federal level, at the state, and who knows how else. But this is just showing, so roughly half of the cost of extending the 2017 tax laws reflects tax breaks for the top 5% of households. So this is, in 2017, the Trump's tax cuts were passed, and many of them were permanent, but a lot of the personal income side, including like pass-through deduction, that sort of thing, were made temporary. And that is what they're proposing extending at this time. And those, by and large, are tax cuts for the wealthy. And this chart just shows this half goes to the wealthiest 5% of households in the US. So this is extremely high income households. And it's extremely expensive. These provisions, while not only regressive, are also going to balloon the deficit, adding hundreds of billions of dollars to the deficit each year. Extending these tax cuts would cost $3.6 trillion through 2034 in the next decade. That's just an insane number. That's really unsustainable. And I think what's most important to think about when we're talking about these federal tax cuts is that we did this in 2017. We have evidence and studies showing what the effect was. And research shows that it failed to significantly boost economic growth, workers' earnings, or other benefits for workers. The trickle-down benefits that proponents claimed the 2017 law would produce never materialized, and it hasn't even come close to paying for itself. This chart shows that the corporate rate cut, for example, didn't boost worker earnings. Most of it went to executives, those earning over $951,000 a year. So it's just another example of how trickle-down economics really doesn't work, and we should really be doing something else.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Mike a question, and then maybe we'll get another question, circle back. I've been remiss to remind the audience that you can ask a question by going to the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer it by one of the panelists, or if not, we'll try to answer it by written text and get back to you. So we had a question earlier from one of our members of the audience that says, Mike, can you talk about the bill to decrease business equipment tax and business equipment exemption and the shifting taxes to homeowners. It says that, if you recall, business equipment cuts started in 1989. Mike.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat about that. I'm going to give you kind of a long-winded answer because I want to get Gladys back into this discussion a little bit. In the Flathead, we did see our property taxes increase 38% in 23 and 31% coming up. This is the portion that no one's really mentioning, is the upcoming portion. And when you look at the proposals on the table, Representative Thane did a nice job talking about his bill, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that of the $1.4 billion in taxable value increase from the two reappraisals, Representative Thane's bill only reduces taxable values by $580 million. That means that bill is going to collect $82 million extra per year from the two reappraisal cycles. Now, people are forgetting the upcoming reappraisal cycle is the one that's going to jack up your value. So all the values that people are talking about are suddenly going to get jacked up. And that's the numbers that folks like Gladys are going to pay on. And so, the only particular bill currently that neuters both the reappraisal cycles is Representative Burns' 528. And that's because he has the spirit of 76 in that bill. He's got the liberty to let people keep their money. And it doesn't matter if you put that 0.76 in Representative Thane's bill or Representative Jones' bill. As long as it's 0.76, people get to keep their money. And these other rates that folks are talking about just means that the state is going to keep collecting extra money. The reason you folks don't see it is because the fiscal note has already got it built in. That's why you have to go back and look at the taxable value increases. Representative Thane and Representative Jones leaves the property tax baked into the cake. You're going to keep seeing the escalation. They can put more money in both those bills, and those bills would work out as long as they get you down to that spirit of 76. Now, the data centers and the business equipment tax cuts and the wireless equipment tax cuts that everyone's kind of talking about in the legislature, they're good tax cuts for that particular industry. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you were in that industry, you'd like that tax cut. Now, the difference is that somebody's got to pay that balance locally, and it's the homeowners that are going to pay the balance. So any business equipment tax cuts that's coming forward, the data center tax cuts coming forward, the wireless equipment tax cuts coming forward are going to be paid by homeowners. That's the unfortunate reality of that particular system. Now, there's also been all sorts of talk. I'm going to circle back to Gladys a little bit. Montana used to have a homestead exemption, and lawmakers decided they wanted to bake that into the tax rate. And that's why the tax rate was lowered, because it was a percentage, just 2%. They put them together, the tax rate lowered. Now, if Montana wants to have a Comstead or a homestead exemption, again, that's visible and simple and people just see, they certainly can do it, as long as the combined total of the effective tax rate is 0.76. You got to stick with that the spirit of the 76. Otherwise, Gladys is going to pay hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars extra while everyone's talking about something not happening. This next reappraisal is going to whack homeowners really soon. They're going to, as soon as the lawmakers come home, that's when Gladys is going to get that 31% state property tax increase. And that's what's missing out of this discussion is you got to deal with both reappraisal cycles, and folks aren't being straight about that. Both these bills are just dealing with half the problem. You got to fix both cycles. That's the only way forward.
There's always so many questions and almost so much that we could say, and we're running out of time. Rose, do you have any last words before we go to close?
Thank you for having us today, and it's nice to see so many people following the tax debates. Things are moving really quickly right now, and It is just important to keep pushing on legislators when you get messages from Big Sky 55 Plus to do the right thing. And from our perspective, that is just trying to get as much relief as we can to those who feel the crunch the most, those paying high effective property tax rates, income tax rates, and lower and moderate income families.
Well, I want to thank you, Rose, Mike, and Mark. It was a great discussion tonight. I wish we could have more time.
Well, Dennis, I really appreciate the effort that you guys have put forward. I mean, it's been a tremendous joy, and I really appreciate the work you guys do. The only closing thing that I would just say is, look, keep this thing simple, make it understandable for people, stop the increases, and lower those taxable rates, taxable values back down. Honor the spirit of 76. If you do that, what you'll find is the local levies and the safety levies and the local school bonds levies will pass once again because people won't be overtaxed. Spirit of liberty, defensive principle, and the freedom from government overreach is what the spirit of .76 is all about. I thank you.
What a great town hall meeting. We are so grateful for your passion, expertise, leadership, for standing up for fair and adequate taxes in Montana. Big Sky 55 Plus has always felt that we must work for fairness in our tax policy because so many things that make our communities work, that provide for high quality life in Montana that we cherish, are integral to the functions of our state. At the federal level, we're getting a tutorial on how vital many tax-funded public services that we take for granted are: the VA, healthcare, reliable weather forecasts, clean water across Montana, education for children with disabilities, on and on. As we wrap up tonight's town hall, if you're on our Big Sky 55 email list, you will get timely alerts that make a difference when you take action. There's action links that you can put directly through to emails to our legislators and other elected officials if you wish to address. So the system really is user friendly. It allows you to edit the subject line and tailor your message to the audience, adding or subtracting lawmakers as you see fit. If you need help or a mentor using the alert system, you can send us an email through our website at info@bigsky55.org. You know, we've all learned from Wisconsin last Tuesday night that organized people beat organized money. Or as Joan Baez said, action is the antidote to despair. Big Sky 55 gives us the antidote to despair: accurate, timely information and tools to take action for the common good, working together. We look forward to working with you as we use our superpowers to support greater fairness in Montana's tax system. Thanks again for being with us, and good night.